have a great opportunity to talk to people with a wide variety of backgrounds in the medical field. So you're not just going to hear from doctors, you're going to hear from people in operations and research, and I'm really excited about this webinar. So I'm going to kick it over to Abby, who is our first panelist, and she's going to give you a little bit about what she does.
Hi, everyone. My name is Abigail Lucas. Maiden name is Beautremont. And I currently work in compliance, risk management, and procurement investigations. So I'm more, I guess you could say, on the operations side. I typically work for payers or insurance companies. We also work for Medicare, Medicaid, ACOs, all the different types of health plans. Prior to joining my company, Evolent Health, I worked for 4+ years as a traditional Big Four consultant for PricewaterhouseCoopers in health industries. And then before that, I spent about 4 years on the genetic testing side working for the company that had held the patents for BRCA gene testing for hereditary breast and ovarian cancer.
Awesome. Thank you, Abby. And Abby, we are really excited that you were able to join us. I know you're due any day now with baby number 2, so thank you for joining us anyway.
No problem.
And Audra, why don't you go ahead and give us an introduction about you?
Okay. Hi, I'm Audra Toms, maiden name McNeil, class of 2006. I'm currently an epidemiologist. I do work in health consulting, and I'm consulting right now for the government, working in health programs, opioid safety, pain management, women's health. I'm also a PhD candidate, finishing up my dissertation right now in epidemiology. I did a 2-year fellowship with the Army Public Health Command looking at the disease spread in the military for drug-resistant bacteria. And before that, I was an Army transportation officer.
Yeah, Audra, I'd like to pick it up there. So we're waiting on our last panelist. Camilla will join us any minute now, but she's doing an emergency room rotation right now as part of her residency. So she emailed and said she'd be a few minutes late. I guess the ER doesn't hold for webinars. But Audra and Abby, you both have a unique experience in the Army and logistics and transportation and ordnance respectively that don't align with kind of where you ended up in life. What made you choose the path that you did to get involved in the medical field?
So for me, it was actually always a childhood dream to be an epidemiologist. I read Michael Crichton's Andromeda Strain and always thought that it would be cool to do disease outbreaks and investigations. And I majored in chemistry and life science at West Point, but ultimately didn't want to do the med school route. And I was eager to deploy to overseas, so transportation seemed like a great idea. So that's kind of, so once I did my initial obligation, I revisited what it was that I had a passion for, and that took me back to epidemiology.
My path was a little bit different. It was more of a necessity to find another life path. I had never wanted to do anything but be an Army officer. I come from a very, very long legacy of Army officers. So that was really my only plan. Unfortunately, I got injured and I got out much, much sooner than I planned. And I had some family friends that were like, hey, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, I'm not really sure what else exists. So they knew I was service oriented. They knew that healthcare was a good way to go to give back to your community. I didn't have the interest, to be totally honest, of going back to being a doctor or a nurse. That's a lot of schooling. So I went to the healthcare operations side, really trying to find a way to make things better for patients through the back-end services. And that's what kind of got me down this path. I am very glad I took this path as opposed to a regular business job in finance or accounting. It afforded me the opportunity to go to school. I got to do a fellowship in England at Manchester University, and it really gave me a lot of different avenues. So I found that healthcare was not just about helping other people, but there's a lot of innovation and a lot of work that needs to be done on a regular basis, an ever-changing field. So it was definitely a saving grace for me outside of what my true passion was.
That's awesome. I know both of you talked about furthering your schooling as a way that helped you get into the fields that you're in. And I see that Camilla has now joined us, and she is also in school right now. Camilla, do you mind giving us a brief introduction and a little bit about how you ended up where you're at?
Yeah, sorry, my audio just came on. Could you repeat that?
Can you give us a little bit of an introduction on you and how you ended up where you're at in medical school?
Yeah, definitely. So I don't know kind of what's already been said, but I graduated West Point in 2009 and branched med service corps. I did like a whole bunch of different stuff, but was mostly like medical logistics, that kind of thing. And I think, through a series of fortunate or unfortunate events, I think I decided that I really wanted to go to medical school after I got out. And really, I can probably get into it more later, but I am now in my 4th year of medical school and about to graduate in May. I'm going to be a family doctor. So.
For all three of you who have done education as part of your transition out of the military, did you have a solid plan in how you were going to do that transition? And what hurdles did you have to jump through, or how did that plan change as you started executing on it?
I can go ahead. I think for me, I really did not have a plan. I, kind of got as far as like, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to go to medical school and I know I want to do that. And I think there, kind of trying to figure out like what my next steps were was pretty difficult, only because at the time there really weren't a whole lot of resources, and the people that I, the few people that I did know who had been to medical school and were practicing medicine, had been through the process, several years before. And so a lot of their experience wasn't necessarily relevant to mine. And I think I probably made the process a lot longer and harder on myself just because, trying to basically do a series of internet searches and phone calls with people who, had some outdated advice. It became kind of a long and expensive process. But eventually I did get myself into a post-bac pre-medical program, which was really, really helpful in kind of mapping out the next steps in terms of like testing and actually applying to school. So at that point, it kind of streamlined a little bit. But to answer your question, I really didn't have a plan and I kind of suffered for it.
So oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I also didn't have too much of a plan. I think I alluded to that since it was since healthcare became very much a backup plan. But for school, because I didn't take the path that the other two ladies did, as far as, the hardcore science of medical school in one way or another, I did go back and get an MBA at night at USC. So the reason I did that was simply to make myself more marketable. I knew I needed some kind of continuing education, and I frankly got bored in the role that I was in. So I wanted to hit up maybe Big Four consulting, try and live that life for a while. And someone said, go back and get your MBA. And so that's how I ended up down that path. I also, like I said before, did a fellowship at Manchester University as part of that program. That was also very much a last minute decision. An opening came up. I decided I really didn't like my new boss, and that was it for me. So night school was no longer enough. I was going to go full time in England, have another adventure. So it really, I think not having a plan also can make you a little more flexible. I was able to take advantage of some really pretty neat opportunities, not having that plan and just deciding, okay, well, I don't have anything tying me to the U.S. Let's just pick up and move for a while, which was a really fantastic way to meet new people and get an even different, a different look at, for example, in Europe where they have a lot of universal healthcare. So it was a cool experience. There's positives and negatives to not really having a plan.
Yeah, I think for me, I thought I had a plan, but looking back, I'm not quite sure it was as thought out as I thought it was. I did my master's while I was still on active duty. I found a public health program that was a pretty neat program that was established by the CDC to help prepare people following the pandemic and the anthrax attacks. So I had that master's while I was getting out and applied for PhD programs and was fortunate enough to get into two, and I went to the one that offered funding. So I was basically like, okay, I'm good to go. And that was at the extent of my plan. But, you know, I was able to kind of go from there, just to have that foundation set, and was fortunate enough, really, is what happened.
You're each going into or are in very separate fields within the medical profession. What are some growing career fields that you see on the horizon that you would recommend people, if they're just exploring different opportunities, might be good fields for them to enter into now?
I think, like, you know, if you don't want to take the plunge and go to medical school, I can't say like more about kind of mid-level providers, so like PAs, nurse practitioners. I think that's a fantastic way, to practice medicine, and get to that point where you're actually seeing patients on your own like much sooner. And I think the way kind of the American health system is changing, we need so many more of those folks because they are absolutely like indispensable in a primary care environment. And you can also do like more specialized medicine too. And again, it gives you a lot more flexibility, and you can complete your education sooner. Like, for example, PA school is 2 years, and you don't have to do a residency if you don't want to. You can just get out there and start seeing people. So that would be probably what I would recommend to folks.
Yeah, I think different than a clinical experience would be public health. There's a lot of data and analysis and operations. There's government side, CDC, state and local governments, and then academia as well. And then pretty much every major company has, like an occupational health. There's some kind of health person, whether it's like how to help their people respond during a crisis, or even doing benefits. So like health really touches everything. So if you don't necessarily have to look in the industry specific for the medical field to find health related topics, if that's where your passion lies.
Audra, I think that's really interesting. It's kind of broadening the perception of what medical is. And I think, Abby, to your point, you talked about people that knew that you were service oriented. So how can I continue to serve others post-military that would allow me to kind of live out my values? And that may be going the MD route, or it could be a number of other routes. And if you just think a little bit more broadly, you might find what you're looking for.
Absolutely. I mean, I think if you're not, Jackie knows, I'm not school-oriented kind of person. I'm more of I want to just do things with my hands and get it done. And you make an excellent point, is there's a lot in the healthcare system that needs to be fixed, needs to be done, needs to be innovated upon. We now, a lot of people are very interested in pay for performance, and that whole model in ACOs. And so if you don't want to go back to school, or the idea of, blood makes you squeamish or something like that, and it makes you think twice about being in the medical field, there's a lot to be done in the healthcare space, and there will continue to be, whether you're a nurse practitioner, a doctor, or somebody who works in innovation on the technology side, or even in compliance like I do in risk management, hedging our bet and risks and looking at the landscape and performance of physicians and things like that. There's always something to be done that can help the beneficiary.
What are you guys seeing as far as kind of how operations side, or Camilla, to your point about mid-level providers, what is everything that you do? How is it supporting the practitioner on the ground, or ultimately the patient, as we think more broadly about medical professions?
I think, to my point earlier, I was discussing, mid-level providers. I think the big thing there is it expands access. I think one of the biggest problems that people have just across the country is like, just this chronic lack of access to basic medical care. And a lot of that is because, there aren't enough primary care providers to see absolutely everybody. And the primary care offices that do exist is, we schedule like 10-minute appointments per person. And that is just like not enough time to have a meaningful relationship with people. and, you know, mid-level providers especially, and also including like, you know, tech and nursing staff, the more, you know, support you have, the more patients you can see, and the more patients you can actually give like meaningful care, and the less likely you are to, you know, to miss something and to, you know, kind of overlook, you know, major medical issues. And we know that, you know, the more often that people, you know, go to the doctor, and the more like quality diagnostic care that they get, and the more preventive care they get, the healthier they are in the long run, and the more likely they are to continue seeking care. And so, I mean, ultimately, it really is a question about, you know, like, you know, kind of like, you know, the value of human life. And I think that whatever part of that chain you're supporting, it is all about the patient.
So I'm curious, Camilla, I know you started a nonprofit called Bet2MD, and we've heard a couple of people talk about options, including yourself, if you're not thinking you want to go all the way through an MD program. But for those that do, what do you see are the biggest roadblocks, or what are the biggest reasons that veterans don't go to medical school, and how does Bet2MD help?
So I think the biggest thing that's blocking, you know, the veterans specifically from, you know, from doing medical school is kind of the same reason that a lot of, you know, non-traditional applicants might, you know, hesitate. I think we tend to be older, we tend to have families, we tend to be a little bit more established. And I think medical school by and large is it skews very young, and it skews very like, upper middle class, upper class population. And I think what would discourage a lot of people from, you know, maybe thinking that's an option is, I mean, one, it is long, it is expensive, and it is extremely hard. And I think that for somebody who's, you know, getting out of the Army and they just want to, you know, hit the ground running and start working and making money and settle down, I think it's kind of like the antithesis, right? We're telling you like, even if you have GI Bill, it's still going to be very expensive. Even after 4 years of school, you know, that's 4 to 7 years of residency training, and then even more if you want to specialize further. And I think it's just like, it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy, and the subject matter is just hard. And I think, you know, kind of knowing and understanding that it's going to take you away from your family, and I think that can be really intimidating. I'm almost done with it, and it's still very intimidating. But what I'm hoping that, you know, I can do, you know, through Bet2MD, or just kind of like whenever I talk to people, is I think kind of understanding that like all of those things are true. Like, you know, medical school is going to take a toll on you, and it's not going to be like necessarily the degree of freedom that we imagine when we separate from the military. But at the same time, it's, you know, going into medicine is an incredibly meaningful way to continue service, kind of like has been discussed before. You know, if you are that kind of person, like you're just, you know, a high achiever and you really want to make a difference, like I think it's one of the best things you can do. And I think for a lot of people who think about medical school, you know, it's nothing else is going to make you as happy as, you know, going into medicine, because I think it's a special kind of person that, you know, considers that. And it's kind of like you're really doing yourself a disservice if you kind of just drop it because you think it might be too long or too hard. And I mean, you know, nothing else is going to make you happy. So I think that really kind of asking yourself those questions, and you know, being actively encouraged by other people in the field is incredibly meaningful. Because I think, you know, I certainly had people tell me like, oh, you know, you can do 100 things, and you can go make more money, and you can just, you know, kind of relax and spend time with your family. And, you know, that's you know, it's too much for you. It's just, I don't know why, but everybody was like telling me like, no, it's going to be too much. It's just too much. And which I guess like in retrospect is extremely condescending, but I really want people to know that, like, you know, it's long and it's hard, but it is so worth it. And I think on the other end, it's like you are making such a difference for yourself and for, you know, other people. And again, like with kind of all the changes happening in the American medical system and kind of the state of, you know, of access to care, is like you really will make an impact that is, you know, just, I think, one of the most meaningful that you can.
And Camilla, I know you had a baby along the way, so that definitely complicated the situation for you. And Audra, I'm curious, and you also being a mother, and what are your commonalities from what Camilla said, or has been your experience in your PhD program?
So I've definitely experienced a lot of hurdles myself. Just the transition from the RMAID and having a baby, and you know, moving around quite a bit actually during the program. But so it's definitely had some hurdles. But I think it's, if you have a passion for it and like a purpose of what you have in mind afterwards, I think that makes it easier. And it's something that you can hold on to because it's going to be hard, going either route. And so that it's, finishing up a school like that is definitely isn't easy, but I think making sure you have that passion and a reason for doing it and holding on to that helps to get through.
Yeah. I'm curious. I think when most people think of medical professionals, leadership isn't necessarily the first word that comes to their mind, which may not be fair, but I think that's probably an accurate statement. How is leadership practiced in the work that you do? You're three very different environments. So how do you practice leadership, and what does your team look like, or what will your future team look like?
I think in the clinical environment, there's a lot more, kind of traditional, leadership hierarchy than people realize. One thing I actually really like about GW is our curriculum is very leadership based, but and it will obviously depend on, kind of what field of medicine you go into. Like, a radiologist's, team looks very different than, a family doctor looks very different than a surgeon. But in general, I think it's ironically it very much resembles kind of like military hierarchy, in the sense that I always think of like the attending physician, someone with an MD and, a little bit more experience is generally, kind of in a very officer-like role. And then you have, like more junior physicians kind of under them, and under them you'll have some mid-level providers, and under them you have like your nursing staff, your techs, everything else, which, if you've ever had to, especially be like on an inpatient service somewhere, you definitely see it, because you have like 50 people coming in to talk to you. And you feel like you're repeating the same story every time, but every time you talk to someone, they're reporting to somebody above them. And any decisions that they make ultimately have to be approved by somebody above them, and people with generally like more training and more expertise. And so it is actually very much like a team effort in either a clinic or inpatient or wherever you go.
So I think for me on the consulting side, so basically we're helping, leadership of either hospitals or health programs that have a certain kind of problem, and we help them come up with solutions on the ways to improve it, or interventions to improve outcomes. And so leadership is kind of on both ways. It's within my company itself, and then there's the interaction with a client. So it's definitely different than the military, but I think leadership definitely helps to get things done, and it's definitely something that is valued no matter where you go.
Yeah, and I think to fill in on the operational side or the business side, I would say it's much more like being maybe in senior level staff, where you're having a lot of briefings and things like that. So at the level that I'm at, I have a team, I actually have multiple teams that serve different purposes, but I am reportable because of the nature of my work in compliance and risk directly to the board and the CEO. So I'm often taking information that's either positive or sometimes negative all the way up to the board and letting them know, like, what my plans are to remediate certain actions, to pull back funding, things like that, which I would probably relate more to, like a senior level staff briefing, which I think is where probably most of my classmates in 05 are at this point. Sorry, I'm a little winded. I walked up the stairs at 9 months pregnant.
Abby, I'm curious. Can you describe a little bit more about what it means to be in risk and compliance in a medical field?
Sure. Yeah, I love risk and compliance because I think I've already alluded to the fact that I tend to get bored. So I don't want to do the same thing like managing a call center every day. So risk and compliance in those particular roles, I manage for my company is traditionally a third-party administrator, meaning we're technically like the middleman. In the 3 years that I've been at this particular company, we have moved on from being mostly that to being only partial that, and now we own some of the health plans. So it's more of a traditional health plan type operation. But what I do is I manage 300 plus relationships of the different companies that support the position at the end of the day through call centers, appeals and grievances. They actually deliver the services. Even, for example, the ambulance drivers, we contract with a particular company to provide all of those. So what I do is I make sure that they are up to snuff from a compliance perspective. So I make sure that all of their documentation is correct, or our team makes sure that all their documentation is correct, that they're providing the top level of service for clients, for members at the end of the day. And when I say clients, I mean, the doctors and the health plans. And then in risk management, I really spend a lot of time understanding the marketplace, understanding what the patient profile looks like, understanding the back end, like the full big picture, the back end of health insurance, and then trying to hedge our bets on what our biggest areas of risk are and attacking those with remediation plans and trying to kind of see into the future a little bit to make sure that we keep major risks from impacting the members. So for example, one of the biggest things that came up was Hurricane Dorian in Florida. My company owns 3 health plans in Florida that are all Medicaid. So we did everything from planning certain actual, patients to go from their kidney treatment or to the NICU. We made sure they were medevaced in time, to everything from switching one call center in Florida to another in Texas, making sure there was a seamless transition there. So it's never a dull moment. There's a lot of relationships to manage for our company, and I pretty much oversee the team that does it. And then I try and, on the risk side, future plan for any potential risks that I think are coming based on our, full scope of what we do and what the market looks like, and then also cyber and fraud.
It's really interesting. It makes me think a little bit about my time serving in logistics. And Camilla, I'm hearing some similarities in medical logistics in the Army and some of the background that you have. I'm curious, Camilla, you probably have the best perspective given your med service background and then now your career as a soon-to-be doctor. What do you see as the similarities and differences between military and civilian medicine?
I think the military is very much like a socialized medical system. And I think that, kind of with that mindset, there are a lot of differences. I mean, the biggest one is like, I had no idea, like I had some idea, but I had no idea how much of our job is centered around insurance, who has what we can and can't accept, the socioeconomic, conditions of your patients, and having to, check and double check so many things. Like, what can I do for this person? I was in the ER today and it happens all the time. It's like, what can I do for this person? So that they don't get hit with like a $10,000 medical bill because, I gave them the wrong medication. And I think kind of from like the supply side, I think, just always we have to be so much more cognizant now of how much, certain supplies cost. And I think that, being a medical logistician, I think there was always kind of the assumption that like big Army is going to pay for this. It's okay. There was a frustration, I think a lot of times too, that in the military, it's like, you don't get, everything that you want. Like, for example, pharmaceuticals is a big one. Is like, you have to follow the formulary, but big Army pays for, big Army's paying for this. Like, that's not the provider. It's not on the provider. And it's, to a certain extent, it wasn't even on us as the logisticians to really worry about, kind of like cost and, kind of like meeting numbers and stuff. And so now I feel like it's almost a little more difficult. It's interesting because I think it's a little more satisfying because you have access to, to equipment and pharmaceuticals that like we never would have had access to in the Army because, to a certain, like a large hospital system has the capability to, to order whatever you want and to administer whatever you want. But on the other hand, you have to be so much more careful about kind of making sure that you're doing something that isn't going to be cost prohibitive to the patient. And that's kind of a tough conversation to have with people. It's like, telling them, hey, this medication is better, but I don't think you can afford it. Or, that kind of thing. So there's definitely some glaring differences, I think, in just kind of the mindset of the system in general, kind of like a fee, what is essentially a fee for service or, for insurance versus kind of having a lot more autonomy and a lot more freedom, for what you can do for people and when.
It sounds, Camilla, like as you're describing it, the roles and kind of the expertise that you have to have as an MD is a lot more broad than just the medical expertise. Understanding people, understanding economics, and all those other things it sounds like a critical factor in the work that you do.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And on the one hand, it's actually, that's part of what like excites me so much about it, is that it's not just, kind of like a customer service job where somebody comes in, I fix their problem and they leave. It's, you really get to, know people and develop those relationships over time. I mean, that was a big thing that kind of inspired me to go into medicine, because I am from a rural community where, my family doctor knew my whole family, they knew my friends, they knew everybody. And that was exactly the kind of relationship I wanted. And then on the other hand, I think a lot of this added responsibility that we put on physicians is contributing to some burnout. And that's, kind of a conversation I feel like we have in so many different contexts all the time. Is just like, okay, I want, I have to go see, I don't know, in an 8-hour day, I'll see probably like 25, 30 patients. And oh, by the way, I have to do all the billing for them. And oh, by the way, I have to, go to my practice's business meeting. And oh, by the way, I have to do like all this other stuff. And so it's kind of a period of transition at the moment and trying to figure out like how best to handle that. And it's going to be really interesting to see like, how and, if we, kind of are able to get any medical, reform on the medical system through in the next few election cycles. But you're right. It's, it's your job is so much more than just a practitioner.
Yeah. I'm curious, for all three of you, what experiences did you have in the military, or what attributes and characteristics, traits have made you successful in your post-Army careers? And what do you lean on that you didn't really realize at the time was going to be so helpful?
I think for me, like it's probably two buzzwords of adaptability and resilience, and kind of being able to recognize, opportunities and be able to adapt to different changes, and then, just being, keeping at things and having that resilience. I think carrying that over from the military has been very helpful.
I would agree.
I would say probably, oh, go ahead.
Okay. No, you go ahead.
I was going to say probably, actually, to piggyback off of something you were just saying, is the never quit attitude. So even though I'm on more of the operations and business side, it's still really critical to me to make sure that we are providing the best, we can for members, and not impinging on the work, that the practitioner is doing. So a lot of times if I have a vendor, for example, that's, not providing services or not getting back to physicians timely, that infuriates me, because I know at the end of the day, it's just frustrating for the physician to have to call, or their staff to have to call multiple times to get what they need for a patient. And you might be missing critical access to care timelines for those patients, especially in like the Medicare and Medicaid field, where, it's those particular patients oftentimes have other comorbidities or other issues that they're dealing with, that they need that care ASAP. So I would say never quitting and just being super flexible that in the back end of the system, you know, you want to make sure that you're supporting those frontline folks as best as possible.
Yeah, I mean, everything you both said. And I think the big one for me was that, you know, in the Army, we do so many, you know, we do so many things. Like we go on so many missions and we deploy and, you know, we do a lot of hard things. And I think kind of having that kind of experience and sort of knowing that, like, you know, no matter how hard something is and how much, you know, of a slog it feels like, it's, you know, there is something better on the end. And I think kind of a real appreciation for that. And also, I mean, not for nothing, I think it's kind of, we've done enough things with other people and knowing that there is kind of that shared misery and sort of like an appreciation that if you're having a hard time, other people are probably having a hard time too. And I think in medical school in particular, that has really been a good perspective to have, is like, one, this will end and everything's going to be great on the other end, but also, like, you know, I know everybody else is having a hard, is, you know, struggling just as much as I am, even if they're, you know, trying to put on a brave face. And so it's really just kind of keeping your eye on the prize, as it will.
So kind of the flip side of that question, what has surprised you, or what is something that you weren't quite as prepared for as you thought maybe you would be?
On the off side, sometimes how much people don't give a crap that get into healthcare. that sometimes still surprises me. I'm like, why are you in this line of business if you don't truly care about getting the job done right? And it's very frustrating. But I see it a lot in compliance and risk, because, you know, our job is to be the hall monitor.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that too. I think, you know, by and large, my colleagues, you know, care very much about people and they're going into medicine for the right reasons, but you do run into those folks who, like, and this is beyond me. Like, why would you go to 4 years of medical school and then like 4+ years of residency if you're like just going to be a complete asshole to people? And, you know, there's certain people that, like, I've met that are openly like, who don't like dealing with patients. They would just want to do procedures, you know, or whatever. And it's just so baffling to me that, you know, and usually those are people that are in it for money or prestige. And like I said, that is like a minority of people, but it still just shocks me.
I think one thing that I hadn't counted on when I got out and going into the medical is that definitely the health and medical field, it's definitely a strong women presence. So I think when I went to my degree program, I went from, you know, being one of the 12%, you know, of women to, it was probably less than 12% of men were actually in my program. So it was almost flipping the gender proportions there. So that took some getting used to, and being used to going from being like kind of the only woman in meetings and on teams to being surrounded, which I love it now, but it was definitely something that I hadn't thought about, that, you know, it's something I noticed.
I think it's really interesting to hear you talk about the difference in purposes that people feel going into the medical professions, because all three of you talked about how helping others was part of why you got into the fields that you did. And I also think it's interesting, this idea of a strong female presence. I think oftentimes we can forget that we're the only woman in the room in the military. And then it can be eye-opening when you find that you're one of the majority in the room. So I had a similar experience in graduate school, so I understand that feeling, and it is just takes a little bit of getting used to and dealing with that. I'm curious, for each of you, what's your goal for your career?
One of my major goals, you know, post residency is one of the many reasons I went into medicine is I really wanted to practice medicine in an underserved environment. And so that's really kind of the direction I'm going. I still haven't quite made a decision like what I'm thinking in terms of geography, but there's a pretty robust system of like federally qualified health centers, you know, across the country. And I think that, you know, depending on funding, that, you know, hopefully those programs could increase. And I really do find a lot of meaning, working in those environments, and kind of, I've talked about access to care like a couple times at least. But I really do want to be able to work with like, an underserved population that isn't necessarily very well insured. Because that really is, to me, like the kind of, the purpose that's really driving me to do what I'm doing.
I think for me, I still have that passion of military health and veteran health, and I'd like to continue working, especially with veterans, and it's going to be definitely needed in the upcoming years of veteran health and how to improve that. So that's definitely a passion that I still have, and I think I'd eventually like to get into teaching as well, and that's one of my goals.
I know for me, at this point, because I've been doing this for over a decade now, that I definitely want to hit the C-suite. While I would say that it's correct that the healthcare field is female dominated, you'd be surprised how often at the senior levels of different businesses and different companies, there is still a very, very, very small population of women. So I would actually really like to, in my career, hit the C-suite and possibly even have the ability to do some of the change and effectuating some policy change and things that need to happen for our country to have a better healthcare system, which you can have more of an effect on at the senior level. And also because I won't lie, money is nice, and in healthcare you do get paid pretty well on the ops side. So I just want to keep going. I want to keep going and try and continue to affect change, and change really a lot of the male-dominated senior levels in healthcare, especially for women and women's health.
Two things that resonated with me, Abby, that you just said is about money. And I have a colleague who says money's not a motivator, but it is a metric. And so you can know kind of the value that you add in the world, and money is a way to measure that. So no shame in that. I'm also curious, this idea that leadership within your profession is male dominated. And I don't know if you see the same, Audra and Camilla, but what are you seeing is preventing women from getting promoted into those senior levels, or to, pursuing those senior levels? And what can be done in order to help women get there?
I think, we actually, this is like an ongoing conversation that, we've had during medical school, and just, kind of across, specialties, just, in the medical community. I think medical schools are doing a much better job of recruiting women. My class at GW was like more than 50% female, and that was like only the second time they'd ever done that. And so that's like really a point of pride. And we're having more women going into residency than ever before. But women are still not, they're still not kind of like ascending to quite the level that their male colleagues are. And the biggest thing for that, that we've known for a long time, is that a lot of times clinical medicine, if you're working full time, it's really not easy to be, a practicing physician working 5 or 6 days a week and have a family. You see a lot of women either leave work and then come back after having children, or just leave work entirely, or go part-time, kind of as they have the right to do. But when you do that, you come back, and because of like the lack of clinical hours, you have to kind of like, enter where you left. And I think medicine is certainly not the only field where this is true. But I think that the biggest thing we need to do, and, I am very much, an advocate for kind of, reforming, postgraduate medical education and kind of the way things are, kind of the systems that are in place in major medical systems, is we really need to support, families, kind of the way that the military really does a decent job of. I mean, we need to let doctors have maternity leave. Like one of my biggest concerns is in residency, you don't get maternity leave. Like if you have a baby, you get your 3 weeks of vacation. And then if you miss any more time, that's like time that is either added on to the end of your residency that you have to make up, or, you just like, you can't stay in the program. And so that's really, kind of disappointing that it's 2020 and then that's the truth. And, certain specialties are kind of notorious for being very toxic for, for women and families. Going into family medicine is one of the better ones, thankfully. But I think, hospital systems need to do a better job of kind of supporting, physicians, men and women, and their families, and giving them, enough time off to, to have a life and kind of make you feel like you're making a difference without burning you out.
Yeah, I think with my company, I got pretty fortunate that my husband, with his job, he has to move around quite a bit, and they've essentially let me go almost full-time remote, where I just occasionally travel. And that's been just amazing to be able to have that opportunity to stay with the same company and still contribute and still support his career as well, which I think probably resonates with a lot of military spouses. And the other thing is, just I had a great maternity leave too. When I had my baby, I had 16 weeks off. So being able to have 5 months of paid maternity leave was amazing. And definitely it came back ready to work. And so I think just being able to support from that. And I also think that I think especially when you have a family, I think your priorities change, and things that once you maybe wanted to do kind of might change based on having a family. And so it's I think that there's a few different things, and that are the reason for that. That's difficult for women going forward.
Yeah, I don't know that I would have any much more to add. I think it's the same even on the business side. There's still opportunities where we could beef up some of the maternity leave packages and things like that. But I know in my particular company, they continue to lose women at the senior levels. And I think that's more, to be perfectly honest, due to the personalities that are at the senior levels. Since I interact with them on a daily basis, I can tell you there's still a lot of guys that, just don't get it. They don't get the purpose of having a family, and that was part of the reason why I had to leave PwC. I was traveling by air 52 out of 52 weeks a year most years, and it's funny, really hard to get pregnant when you're gone all the time. So I made that change, and I know at Evolent, I do love my company, but I don't know that they're as welcoming to women at the senior levels. I've definitely had a lot of pushback that has made me question, why exactly are you pushing back on me? But again, given the nature I know in this panel of women, I just look at that and go, yeah, whatever, I'm here, deal with it.
Yeah, thank you, ladies. I really appreciated kind of your candid conversation about some of the things that you faced in your transition into your various professions within the medical fields. I'd like to hear any kind of closing thoughts. What would you like to leave West Point women who are potentially interested in looking in careers similar to yours? What are some things that you would like to pass on to them that we haven't yet covered?
I think the only thing, really left that I could say, and this is, kind of just going off of, some comments I made before, is that I think, if you want to go into clinical medicine, you don't need to be intimidated by the length and the cost of the education process. One, I think that, one of my biggest goals with Vet to MD is kind of making that process less nebulous, and make it, make you realize how accessible it really is if you have the right resources and if you have people to answer questions. And I'm, more than happy to talk to, anybody or point you in the right direction. And then I think just the biggest thing for me is clinical medicine, for me, I think is just an incredibly meaningful, path in life. And even on your worst days, you're still making a difference for somebody and you're making somebody's life better. And if that's what you want to do, I really do stand by kind of my statement before that nothing else will make you happy. I mean, if you really want to get out there and put your hands on people and make them better, and kind of make your communities better and build those relationships, I think that that's, the one thing that is really, going to give you meaning in your career and in your life moving forward. And then I guess, given my comments before about how kind of how difficult, women might find certain fields, I think despite that, there's a lot that's going to change in the medical system. And I think it's people like, West Point women have like such a unique background that sort of equips them to like, be the bearers of those changes. And I think that, we definitely need more veterans in the field. And, because they make wonderful doctors. So please consider it.
I think for me, I've kind of lived by the motto of make them say no. You aren't going to get something unless you put your name in the hat and try to go for it. So, I just say that don't be intimidated, at least try, because you never know what you might be able to accomplish.
I think the only thing I would probably add is, I 100% agree. If you have a passion to be a practitioner, then you should definitely go for it. But if you want to be involved in healthcare and you don't have that fiery passion to work with patients every single day, but you still want to help them in some way, there is so much that needs to be done in healthcare and will continue to need to be done. It's one of the rare fields where almost none of it can be replaced by robotics. Which is a big thing that's a conversation point now, is what career fields are going to be replaced by robots one day. It is starting to happen, so it's not crazy. I mean, it's definitely happening in logistics all over the world in port operations, where a lot of folks are losing their jobs to robots. So healthcare is still an area where we need critical thinkers. We need people who are very interested in finding new pathways and implementing those, writing doctrine, writing new methodologies, enacting them. There's just a lot to be done. So that you can definitely find a home in healthcare, even if you're, not oriented toward being a practitioner.
Yeah, to dovetail off of that, I know, I think each of you mentioned a little bit about medical policy and kind of the future. And I know, Camilla, that's an area of interest for you. And Abby, you also specifically mentioned it. So I could imagine that as another avenue within the medical fields that we haven't really touched on in this webinar. Do either any of you have any thoughts on policy and how people could perhaps pursue a route in that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I love health policy. I love, being able to work on health policy. Going to medical school in DC has been like amazing for, the amount of exposure we've gotten to that. There is a lot to be done. Yeah, I think like, kind of the easiest thing you can think of is, being able to, work for organizations like, like the FDA, or other regulatory bodies, always needing people to help, kind of, shape just policy or operating procedures, or just like, kind of health law. And even, on a, in a local sense, like at, every, state legislature has people who are working, explicitly on health policy every single day and doing incredible work. And I think it's really, really meaningful. And if that's kind of your thing and you're a policy wonk and just really like getting into the weeds about that stuff, but also knowing that you're going to be making a real difference in people's lives, I think that that's, a terrific option.
I would add lobbyists. Not all lobbyists are bad. So sometimes you get lobbying firms that are lobbying for what you want, and what you want to see as a difference. So I would add to that, it's not just the policymakers and the politicians, but there's also the lobbying groups. And I know my particular company uses them when we need them, to change the way healthcare is delivered. It's part of our mission, and it's truly for the benefit of the patient. It's not, it's not some of the dirty words that come across when you think of lobbyists. It's actually trying to get more funding or, more lax regulations so that we can get some of the drugs through or things like that. So it's not always bad. So lobbying groups is probably another way you could go, especially if you like to argue.
I think kind of along those lines too are advocacy groups. Like the veteran advocacy groups are kind of the obvious ones for this group, but pretty much every disease, major disease or, area has an advocate group that's trying to advocate on their behalf to change policy. So if you have a passion for something like that, that would be an area.
Well, I really appreciate all of your time today and also in the preparation to get us to the point of executing this webinar today. I know you're all very busy women with lots going on. So the fact that you were able to take the time to donate this hour to West Point women once again shows the service in your nature. So thank you for providing us with your expertise and your insight. And Camilla, I know you offered. Abby, I've already made you. And Audra, if I'm sure you're all open to anybody that has any questions for you. So thank you very much. If there's anything that any of these women can do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out to them. Ladies, thank you so much.